Thanks very much for the introduction, Max, and thanks for the opportunity to participate in this summit. I will start by stating something that this audience probably already knows. The procurement department has been one of the hardest hit by this pandemic. The supply of retail goods, fuel, lumber has all been drastically impacted. You've been met with labor shortages that have disrupted your level of supply. There's been demand for different products than what is normal, and some of them have skyrocketed. An example is in the first year of the pandemic, the demand for track pants went up by 50%. It's really something that probably the track pants suppliers weren't expecting, that kind of an increase in demand out of the blue. The other problems that you guys are hit with are that you had to find alternative sources of material, new sources of secure labor. You had to figure out new logistics tracks, freight routes, because the global sources were no longer the best option. So let's start with the idea that you should really not just be purchasing. Let me explain. Let's define what purchasing really is. It's a transactional function. It executes the life cycle of the purchase order itself. So it's associated with acquiring products and services, focusing on achieving short-term goals. You want to make sure you receive the required quantity at the right time and at the right cost. It's a sub-process of procurement. Really, it's a reactive process. You're reacting to things that are happening to the purchase order itself. The flow of purchasing goes from managing the requisition, evaluating quotes from the suppliers, raising the purchase order, and then entering the purchase order into the system, hopefully accurately. You then follow through with the receipt of the product or the service. You do quality checks. You do your three-way match. And that would be your purchase order, the receipt documents, and your invoice. And finally, you process the payments to the supplier. On the other hand, what do we call, or how do we define procurement? Procurement is more of a strategic process function. It identifies the needs and the requirements of the company, the whole entire company. It's a process for the businesses to find new or existing suppliers. So you need to find these at the local level, the national, or often the international level. Procurement is about building and maintaining supplier relationships. You're measuring cost savings, specifically focusing on value and return on investment. The other critical thing that has really come up in a big way during the pandemic is to minimize business risk and enhance profit margin. Procurement then becomes more of a proactive process. You are being proactive in the actual purchasing process. So what is the procurement cycle? Well, you identify your need, first of all, and the need is company-wide. You do research and source the different suppliers. You evaluate the suppliers. You try to find multi-source options. Then you create a preferred vendor supply list. So what you want to do here is there are certain suppliers that you know have better quality, better lead times, better delivery methods. Those are the ones that you want to put at the top of your list, and you want to make sure you have those well identified. You then develop and present your request for quote, send it out to the suppliers, and then you evaluate all their quotes. Then you start negotiating short and long-term contracts. You develop a collaborative buy and ship plan, and the operative word here is collaborative. You're doing this in a partnership with your supplier. You receive the products and services, you do your quality check, and now you've got the completion of the procurement cycle itself. You follow through by establishing key performance indicators. And you measure and monitor the supplier performance because over time, you want to make sure that those are still the best suppliers for your product. You also really build on the cooperative relationship with the suppliers on a continuous basis. That has to be something that is constantly nurtured. The procurement team faces a lot of challenges. A lot of them focus on the reactive process, which we have defined as purchasing. There's continuous firefighting as issues crop up during transaction execution. How much of your time do you spend actually fighting fires? Something didn't come in properly, something was late, the wrong material came in, the wrong invoice price was sent. A lot of times people say they are doing root cause analysis when they have such some sort of an issue come up. But be careful with what people perceive as root cause analysis. So for example, maybe some material came in short. So the explanation was that the new process at the shipping dock was not implemented properly at the supplier location. Maybe finance rejected the invoice and the supplier blamed it on a new employee error. So the root cause isn't that you've got some bad employees or untrained employees. You have to keep asking why. Why is this happening? Why are they untrained? Well, the actual root cause could be that the vendor has a very weak training program. That would be a knock against the quality of that vendor. So keep asking why to make sure that you are getting to the root of the problem and it isn't some sort of an indication that you have a weak vendor. There's too much time and effort placed on making sure that the PO is actually processed, it's received, and it's paid. There's a lot of time spent on that instead of making sure that you're raising the right PO and with the right vendor. The procurement team does face a lot of traditional management challenges. So a lot of times you've got managers that have done it this way for 20 years and it has worked perfectly fine and it should keep on working. Well, you know that traditional procedures were not enough during the pandemic. Risk has always been there, but not to this extent. So traditional views ignore the possibilities of political or econometrical disruptions. Prior to the pandemic, supplier risk management wasn't even in the top 5 concerns of the procurement department. Now it is second per the 2021 CPO planning survey. COVID shutdowns and layoffs and closures are now causing companies to really think about their risk management, and they're really working on minimizing risk in the future. Lack of digitalization of the entire process further adds to the complexity. It increases costs and it definitely causes you a loss of valuable time. The good news, 84% of executives surveyed were at least slightly optimistic about their chances of increasing efficiency by investing in new technology. So investing in new technology does a lot of things for you. It will centralize your data and it will make sure that you have all the information that you need to make the right decisions in your procurement process. So how can we overcome these challenges? Well, we start by reviewing your suppliers. Who makes your critical parts? You need to really focus on those vendors that are making parts that are critical to your organization and your manufacturing process or your provided service. Do you have alternative sources, or are you just single sourced? Make sure that you do have alternative sources in the event that your primary supplier is not able to supply you with the product that you need. Are they regional? Are their suppliers regional? Or are they all impacted by the global supply chain disruptions? Are they a digital manufacturer who could support quick adaptations? Meaning if they're a digital manufacturer, they can pivot a lot quicker to an engineering change that you might request from them. You really need to have knowledge of their manufacturing capabilities so that you understand what they do, how they make it, and how easily they can pivot. You need to conduct intense conversations with your supplier partners. And this is where a lot of times you don't have time to do that, and yet it's so important because that is where you develop that relationship. That is where you get the information that you need. So what you need to do is you need to shift from purchase to supplier relationship. If possible, you want to move to more of an on-demand production, meaning that you want to prioritize your product based on your prioritized customer demand. So for example, many companies or some of the key sports equipment companies converted from making shields for helmets or face masks for sports to PPE face shields for healthcare professionals. So if you can move your production capacity down so that you've got more on-demand production instead of just making to stock, then you could spend a lot less money on warehousing excess product. Overcoming the challenges via connected and digital procurement processes. The digitization supports the organization actually to be both proactive and reactive. Key performance indicators are much easier to put together. They're much easier to monitor and review. So easier monitoring of purchase quality can be done using the three-way match of the reactive process. So the actual execution of the PO right from start to finish, you can compare your purchase order, the invoice that got sent, and the shipping receipts. They're all in your system. You see all of them together. You've got easy retrieval of the quotation versus the invoice of the product or service. And you've got easy confirmation that you've got the right product at the right quality and it came in at the right time. Overcoming the challenges via the digital transformation supports proactive vendor selection and negotiation. So monitoring vendor performance and comparison is much easier. You can see long-term delivery performance. You can see the history of returns, rejects, missed shipments, early shipments, which can be just as bad as late shipments because early shipments means there's material in your warehouse that you don't need and it's taking up space. You've got visibility of incorrect pricing, invoicing, and you also have access and attention to current vendor standing in the market. You see what's going on. You can see that your vendor is maybe missing shipments to other customers. It's losing business elsewhere, and maybe it's starting to lose market share, and therefore you should probably take a look at that vendor and make sure that it's still a viable vendor in the long term. But by having this centralized process, this centralized digital procurement process, you've got readily available data that allows you to better negotiate the next contract or the next price. I now know that maybe I'm in September, I've already hit my quota with the vendor. I have that information available to me and I can call my vendor and talk to him and say, hey, here's the history of what we've done so far. We are this far into our quota. We've already met our quota for the year. Can you give us a better price for the rest of the material? We've picked a couple of companies that we feel are very good examples of vendors that you would want to work with, the type of characteristics that these vendors have, these manufacturers have, are ones that you would look for when you're actually looking for vendors. So the first one is Pan Brothers. It's an Indonesian clothing maker that was making Prada, Armani, and Adidas clothing. Now those those types of clothing, the demand went down for them because everybody was working from home. But the government contacted this company and asked them for help. We really need hazardous material suits. Can you produce something for us? And now they've been able to pivot. They are producing millions of hazardous material suits. They are pumping out jumpsuits in addition to millions of face masks. So they were able to very quickly pivot their production from something that was no longer in demand to something that was very greatly needed in the marketplace. Their focus is on domestic distribution first. Again, very important when we're talking about supply chain disruptions. They are considering potential export in the US, and that signifies that they really do have longevity. So they're going to be sticking around. They're a vendor that you can work with long term. And now they're in their second phase. They're now making 10 million disposable jumpsuits. So they're doing quite well. And in summary, they have a lot of very good characteristics. For example, they're a local supplier, so you're going to minimize your delivery risk. They're able to pivot quickly, meaning they have an agile manufacturing process. And they're going to be able to pivot to any engineering changes that you might request. They also show stability by telling us that they do have plans to export. So therefore, this supplier will likely be there for the long haul. Those are the characteristics that you would be looking for in a vendor. Our second case is Road Bull. So this is an APAC company that has pivoted their process. So they used innovation and enhancement to support on-time delivery. They used technology in the shift to e-commerce through a single ecosystem. So they now use a tech-enabled system for business to business or business to customer services to ensure that the products get delivered on time. They now also have the ability to trace parcels at every step. So if you've ever done an international shipment and you want to know where it is, a lot of times if you don't have this kind of traceability, you become very anxious when you're not quite sure where your product is. Is it on its way? Has it sunk to the bottom of the ocean? If you have this traceability every step of the way, it just causes a lot more relaxation when it comes to you monitoring your incoming product. They maximize efficiency without compromising on service. So they've evolved to extend their fulfillment solutions. So they're now also offering storage, pick-pack services through their own proprietary system. They were actually awarded one of the fastest growing companies in Singapore. So this particular customer, you can see they've done the shift to e-commerce. Therefore, you can order quickly and efficiently. They're tech-enabled to ensure on-time delivery and traceability of the shipments to ease the mind of the customer, and the extension of their proprietary system to help you with storage, pick, pack, ship process shows that they do have stability and they're planning on growing. So in summary, you really want to do research on your suppliers. You want to make sure they're agile. They're able to pivot quickly to your needs. Try to get ones that are local at first. Obviously, you do have to go national or international for certain products, but if you can, get local distributors, get local suppliers so that you reduce your delivery risk. Make sure they're tech-enabled, so they're able to provide the data that you need very quickly. And make sure they're stable, they're growing, and they'll be around for the long term. Digitalize your own process. Transactions become simpler, your knowledge becomes greater. All the information is centralized and quickly accessible by all, so you don't have to do those gut feel decisions. You've got all the data that you need to make the right decisions. You've got historical data available for vendor analysis, and you'll end up with more time to spend on vendor collaboration and negotiation. So the focus for you should be procurement instead of just purchasing. Thank you. And if you have any questions, please put them into the chat. We are Keansa Solutions, and we'll be happy to help you with any questions that you might have. And I look forward to hearing from you on the chat line. Thank you and have a good day.